Okay, so this is a video on normal movement. There is no such thing as normal, as we all know. Everyone's different, everyone's built differently, everyone moves differently, we've all had different injuries previously. But we can say there is a rough guide for how we should be moving. So we need to know this before we can try and treat someone with a dysfunction. We need to know what we're aiming at or what we're looking at. So we're going to start with flexion, or just bending forward to pick something up off the ground. So if, let's say we're just going for, I'm not in any pain, I'm not a patient, I'm just bending down to pick something up, what happens? Okay, so from a side on position, if I'm going to reach something, my hand is the driver. So my arm is going to reach down, my neck, shoulder and thoracic spine are going to have to respond to that motion. Because my head, arm, trunk are going forwards, I have to counteract that. So I have to get a sway backwards. Okay? If I don't get that sway backwards, I'm going to fall over forwards. So as my arm and trunk go forwards, my pelvis has to sway back. Also, as I'm swaying back, so it's a translation posteriorly, I'm getting a rotation in the sagittal plane anteriorly. So sway backwards, rotation forwards, and then I bend forwards from that position. Whether my knees bend or not depends on my flexibility. So that would be normal. So if we're looking at from a skeleton point of view, as the arm reaches, the trunk's going to come into flexion, pelvis sways backwards and rotates forwards. So then we get this action. Now, let's say I'm a disc patient, potential lumbar disc, herniation, irritation, whatever you want to call it. What do? So you will see them in a different position. So they may well be slightly flexed, side bent, extended. There can be a lot of different things going on. But I tend to see a pattern going on with all of them when it comes to bending forwards, when it comes to flexion. So if we just take it from the pelvis point of view, we said normal would be pelvis sways backwards, anterior rotation, and then we get some lumbar flexion from that point. What you tend to see with people with disc pain, they don't get this sway backwards. So their weight tends to stay forwards. They don't get the translation backwards, and they actually get a posterior tilt instead of an anterior tilt. So if we're here, instead of swaying backwards and rotating this way, we get a no translation, or maybe a slight anterior translation, but the pelvis rotates posteriorly. Now, if I've got a nice disc herniation already, posterior tilt with flexion is a top down and a bottom up flexion into the spine. And that's probably what it doesn't like doing. That, in combination with it not translating backwards, means there's a lot of stress and a lot of vertical loading straight through these lower discs. So different strategies we can use for this. We can start to get them into this swaying position. Can they translate their hips backwards without moving, just to get some of that normal pattern in, to get them able to flex more normally? Can we get that translation? Then from there, can we get that anterior rotation? We need to look at the drivers. So if we're bending down, we're using the hand. So it could be anywhere between elbow, shoulder, trunk, lumbar spine, hips, you name it, that could be involved. But we need to know what normal motion is. So normal, again, would be arm comes forward, trunk comes forwards. As soon as my mass goes forwards, my pelvis has to translate or sway backwards. That causes an anterior rotation of my pelvis. Then I get lumbar flexion at the end. This patient would be standing in whatever position they go to reach. They get a posterior tilt, lumbar flexion straight away, bang. don't want to go any further. So we need to look at that and try and get them back towards what we class as normal.